Welcome to Microsoft Excel 2010 Beginner Level 1, brought to you by excellearningzone.com. I am your instructor, Richard Rost. For those of you who are beginners, our goal for today is to get you up and running with Excel 2010 as quickly as possible. The first hour of tutorials will cover using Excel 2010's interface, including the ribbon, the quick access toolbar, and more. And you will learn how to enter data into a spreadsheet and then edit that data. You will learn how to format a spreadsheet to make it look more professional, and you'll learn to perform some basic math operations in a spreadsheet. Finally, you learn how to save your spreadsheet to disk, load it back up again, and print it to your printer. This class is designed to be used with Microsoft Excel 2010, a part of Microsoft Office 2010. If you are using an older version of Excel, you should visit my website at excellearningzone.com and look for my older tutorials covering Excel 2000 through 2007. If you are using Excel 2007, you should have little difficulty following along, as most of the topics covered in this course are the same. If you are using Excel 2003 or earlier, you really should either upgrade to Excel 2010 or purchase a tutorial for your version of Excel, which again you can find on my website. Before taking this course, I strongly recommend that you take one of my beginner Windows courses, either Windows XP, Vista, or Windows 7, depending on which version you have. You should have a good understanding of how to use Windows before taking this course. You should be familiar with such topics as how to log on to Windows, how to use the keyboard and mouse, how to launch programs, how to maximize and minimize a window, how to use the scroll bars, and you should know the difference between the backspace and delete keys. All of these things are essential for understanding Excel. If any of these concepts seem unfamiliar to you, please stop now and take one of my beginner Windows courses first. If you are planning to learn Microsoft Word in addition to Excel, I recommend that you take my Word 2007 beginner course first, then move on to Excel. Microsoft Word, and word processing in general, is easier to learn than working with spreadsheets. If you're new to computers, you'll find it's easier to get some experience and practice using Word first, then move on to Excel. Learning the Word interface will help you to learn the Excel interface, as many features, such as the ribbon, are very similar. In my Word 2010 Beginner Level 1 course, you'll learn how to use the Word interface, entering and editing text, formatting text, using the clipboard, saving and loading files, and lots more. This is the Beginner Level 1 course for Microsoft Excel 2010. This class is for the novice user who has little or no experience with Excel. In today's course, we'll cover just the most basic features of Excel and teach you how to edit spreadsheets effectively. Our goal for today is to get you up and running quickly with a simple Excel spreadsheet. My courses are broken up into 4 groups: Beginner, Expert, Advanced, and Developer. My beginner courses are for novice users who have little or no experience with Microsoft Excel. They're designed to give you an overview of the basic features of Excel and cover just what you need to know to be productive. When you finish the basics, it's time to move up to the Expert series, which is designed for users who are already comfortable with Excel. Expert classes are designed to teach you more about all the standard features of Excel that people use from day to day, and will go into more depth about each topic than the beginner classes. You will learn all about the options, alternatives, shortcuts, tips and tricks, and extra features that we might have skipped over in the beginner lessons. When you've mastered the Expert classes, the Advanced lessons are for Excel power users. You'll learn how to record macros, build user forms, create your own templates, and many more advanced features that not everyone will use, but they really add enhanced functionality and professionalism to your spreadsheets. Finally, my developer level courses are designed to teach you how to program in Visual Basic for applications with Microsoft Excel. This will allow you to create Excel-based programs for your users, automate your spreadsheets, and to integrate Excel tightly with other Microsoft Office applications. Each of my series are broken down into different levels. For example, the beginner series starts with level 1, that's this class, and is followed by levels 2 through 5. Each level teaches you new and different topics in Microsoft Excel, building on the lessons learned in the previous levels. When you've finished all the beginner classes, move up to the expert series, then advanced, and finally, developer. Now let's take a more detailed look at what we're going to learn in today's class. In Lesson 1, we're going to begin by learning about the Excel interface. We'll learn how to start Microsoft Excel. We'll learn about the title bar, the window controls, and the File tab. In Lesson 2, we're continuing our look at the Excel interface. We'll look at the ribbon tabs, groups, commands, and dialog box launchers. Continuing on with the Excel interface, in Lesson 3, we'll learn about the Quick Access Toolbar, the Status Bar, the Zoom Control, and the Scroll Bars. In Lesson 4, we're going to finish our look at the Excel interface. We'll start with the Formula Bar, then learn about the parts of a spreadsheet, including rows, columns, and cells. We'll learn about the mouse pointer and the different sheet tabs. In Lesson 5, we're going to learn how to enter data into our first spreadsheet. In Lesson 6, we'll learn how to edit the data that we entered into our spreadsheet in the last lesson. In Lesson 7, we're going to start looking at how to format our spreadsheets to make them look more professional. We'll learn about cell alignment, cell ranges, bold, italics, and underline. In Lesson 8, we're going to continue learning about formatting our sheets. We'll learn how to change the font size. We'll learn how to resize rows and columns. And we'll learn how to change the foreground and background colors. In Lesson 9, we'll learn how to perform calculations in Excel. We'll learn how formulas work, and we'll learn about the basic math operators. In Lesson 10, we're continuing on with basic math in Excel. We'll learn how to add multiple cells together, take an average of a group of cells, and we'll learn about the order of operations in mathematics. In Lesson 11, we'll learn how to save our workbook to our computer hard disk, load it back up again, and print our spreadsheet to the printer. If you need help with the topics covered in today's lessons, please feel free to post your questions in the Excel Interactive Student Forums. If you're watching this course using my custom video player software or online in my web theater, you should see the student forum for each lesson appear in a small window next to the class videos, if you have an active internet connection. Here, you will see all of the questions that other students have asked, as well as my responses to them, and any other comments that other students have made. I encourage you to read through these questions and answers as you start each lesson, and feel free to post your own questions and comments as well. If you're not watching your lessons online, you can still visit the student forums later by visiting excellearningzone.com/forums. To get the most out of this course, I recommend you sit back, relax, and watch each lesson completely through once without trying to do anything on your computer. Then replay the lesson from the beginning and follow along with my examples. Actually create the same spreadsheet that I make in the video. Build a spreadsheet with me step by step. Don't try to apply what you're learning right now to other projects until you've mastered the sample spreadsheet. If you get stuck or don't understand something, watch the video again from the beginning, or tell me what's wrong in the student forums. Most importantly, keep an open mind. Excel might seem intimidating at first, but once you get the hang of it, you'll see that it's real easy to use. In Lesson 1, we're going to begin by learning about the Excel interface. We'll learn how to start Microsoft Excel. We'll learn about the title bar, the window controls, and the File tab. Let's begin by starting Microsoft Excel. I'm using Windows Vista, but the procedure is the same regardless of what version of Windows you're running. I'll click on my Start button. Now you might see Microsoft Excel right here on the Start menu if you've used it recently. If not, come down and click on All Programs. Then find your Microsoft Office folder. I'll scroll down. There's Microsoft Office. Open that up. Now I have both Microsoft Office 2007 and 2010 on this computer because I still teach classes in both. But I want to find Microsoft Excel 2010. So I will scroll up the list here until I find Microsoft Excel 2010 and then click on that to launch it. And now after a few seconds, Microsoft Excel starts up. If you need more help navigating the Windows Start menu, I cover that in my Windows Basics class. Now at first glance, Excel looks kind of scary. There's a lot of stuff on the screen. There are a ton of buttons and menu options and other settings that you can change. Don't be intimidated. We're going to cover the stuff that you need to know to use Excel in today's class. Once you get the hang of it, it really is quite easy to use. Now before we start actually using Excel, let's take a few minutes to go over the parts of the Excel interface so you know what you're looking at on the screen. Now the first thing I want to mention is that the menus that you see on your screen might be slightly different than what you see on my screen. Now that's primarily because this big menuing system that you see right here called the ribbon is dynamic, and it will change based on the size of your screen. Now I've made my copy of Excel small to fit inside my video recording window. So as you'll see, some of my menu groups, like styles and cells here, are compressed down. If I grab the edge of the window here, for example, and resize it to make it smaller, you can see that the ribbon changes accordingly. Likewise, if I make the window larger, you can see the buttons in the ribbon expand, so you can see more information on the screen at once. That's because the ribbon is dynamic, and it will change based on the size of your Excel window. Now, don't worry about what all these different buttons do right now. I just want to make you aware that what you see in the video might not look exactly like your copy of Excel. That's okay. You should be able to find everything just fine. Now let's talk about the different parts of the Excel interface. Across the very top of the window, you'll see the title bar. Mine says Book 1, Microsoft Excel. It's called the title bar because that's the title of the current program, Microsoft Excel. Book 1 is the name of the current workbook that we're using. Later on, when we learn how to save our workbook files, the name of your workbook will go across the top here. In the upper right corner of the window, you'll see the window control buttons: Minimize, Maximize, and Close. Now in Excel, unlike Microsoft Word, you'll see two sets of Minimize, Maximize, and Close buttons. The top set of buttons are for Excel as a program. The bottom set of buttons are for the workbook inside of Excel. We'll talk more about this when we learn how to work with different workbooks. But for now, we're pretty much going to stick with the top set. The Close button will close Excel down. The Maximize button will make Excel fill the entire screen. And the Minimize button will move Excel down to your taskbar to get it out of the way for other programs. I cover using the Maximize, Minimize, and Close buttons in my Windows Basics course. The Minimize button, for example, will send Excel down to your taskbar. And now you can see Excel's right down here on the taskbar. To restore it to a normal size window, click on it again. That'll open it back up. If you want Excel to fill the entire screen, click on the Maximize button. Now Excel fills my entire screen, and you can't see the whole thing because it's larger than the video window. But notice how the ribbon is now fully expanded. To restore Excel back down to a normal sized window, notice how the Maximize button has changed to the Restore Down button. Click on that, and that restores Excel to a normal sized window. In the upper left corner, we have the new File tab. The File tab is where you're going to go to save your workbook, load up different workbooks, print your workbook, and access different Excel options. We'll see how some of these things work a little later on. For those of you who might have used Excel 2007, you might remember the big round Office button. Well, Microsoft replaced that in 2010 with the File tab. When you click on the File tab, it opens up this thing called the Microsoft Backstage view. And again, you can access certain features like saving your file, opening a file, accessing recently used workbooks, and so on. In Lesson 2, we're continuing our look at the Excel interface. We'll look at the ribbon, ribbon tabs, groups, commands, and dialog box launchers. Sprawled out across the top of the window is this big thing called the ribbon. The ribbon is Microsoft's new menuing system that was introduced with Office 2007. The ribbon makes it much easier to find commonly used commands than previous versions of Microsoft Office did. The ribbon is dynamic and will change based on which task or function you're performing. Commands on the ribbon are grouped into different tabs. Here's Home, Insert, Page Layout, Formulas, Data, Review, and View. I'll go back to the Home tab, which has most of the commonly used functions on it. The ribbon may change based on what you're doing. For example, if I insert a picture into my spreadsheet, you'll see the Picture Tools Format tab appears. This tab has different functions on it for working with pictures, such as color, corrections, artistic effects, and so on. We'll talk a lot more about inserting pictures and other objects into your spreadsheets in a future lesson. But for now, I just want you to see how the ribbon may change based on what you're doing. Now, the commands on each tab are further broken up into groups. For example, on the Home tab, you'll see a clipboard group, a font group, an alignment group, a number group, a styles group, and so on. There are many different groups on each tab. This is so that all of the related functions are grouped together. For example, in the font group, you'll see different options for working with the font, changing the font type, the size, bold, italics, and underline, and lots more. And remember, the buttons that you see in your groups might be slightly different than what you see in my groups. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of Lesson 1, there are lots and lots of different buttons in Excel. Don't worry about memorizing what all of them do. We'll learn a bunch of them today, and we'll learn more as we go on in our more advanced lessons. If you can't remember what a specific button does, just hover your mouse over it. Don't click, just hold the mouse there. You'll see a little tooltip pop up explaining what that button does. For example, you can see here, that's the bold button. If I move over here and just hover there, you'll see it says Align Text Left. You'll get tooltips for most of the buttons on the ribbon. Some of the buttons may offer more help. For example, if I hover over this button, you'll see it says Font Color, Change the Text Color. Press F1 for more help. That's the F1 button on your keyboard. If you press that, it will launch the Excel help system. We'll cover the help system in more detail in a future lesson. Most of the commands on the ribbon are simple push buttons. For example, if I want to bold the sample text, I'll just click on the bold button, and that turns bold on. You can see the text has gotten thicker. It's now bold. The bold button will stay on until I turn it off. To turn it off, just click on it a second time. That's called a toggle button. You toggle it on or off. Italics is the same way, on or off. Some of the commands are in button groups, and you can select one of the options in that group. For example, I can align left, or center, or align right. Those three buttons are all part of a group. I'll go back to align left. Some of the commands are pull-down menus. For example, if I want to change the font size, I can click this down arrow right here to pull down that menu. Then I can select a different size. And notice just by hovering over the number, I can see a live preview of the change in the background before I commit to it. When I find a size that I like, I simply click, and that sets the font size. Some of the command buttons actually have little command button groups next to them. Notice underline, for example. I can click on the U button for a simple underline, or I can click on the down arrow next to it for underline or double underline. That's a small command button group. To turn it off, just click on the U button again. Some of the commands are grouped together into galleries. For example, on the Page Layout tab, you'll see a Themes button. If I click on the Themes button, you'll see a gallery of options appear. Themes are a collection of colors, fonts, and effects that are bundled together to give your spreadsheets a professional look and feel. We'll talk more about themes in some of our more advanced classes. Now, some of these groups have many more commands and options available than fit on the ribbon. If you look in the bottom right corner of that group, you'll see a little tiny button. That's called a dialog box launcher. And if you click on that button, a full menu or dialog box appears with lots more options. For example, that button brings up the Format Cells dialog box and puts you on the Font tab. You can see lots more font options are available here. For now, I'll just click on the Cancel button. The Alignment group also has a dialog box launcher, and if you click on that, it opens up the same Format Cells dialog box and puts you on the Alignment tab. And you can see there's lots more text alignment options available here as well. Again, I'll just close this window. We'll cover these options in our more advanced classes. For now, I just want to take you on a tour of the ribbon so you can see the different kinds of menu options that are available. Don't worry at this point about what all these different options do. We'll cover them in turn. Continuing on with the Excel interface, in Lesson 3, we'll learn about the Quick Access Toolbar, the Status Bar, the Zoom Control, and the Scroll Bars. In the upper left corner of the Excel window, you'll find the Quick Access Toolbar. The Quick Access Toolbar is designed to give you a place to put buttons and commands that you use on a regular basis. When you first install Excel, all you'll find on the Quick Access Toolbar is Save, Undo, and Redo. And we'll learn about these commands in a few minutes. If you have commands that you use a lot, you can add them to the Quick Access Toolbar to make them always accessible, regardless of what tab you happen to be on. For example, let's say you always use bold. You can add bold to the Quick Access Toolbar by right-clicking on it and selecting Add to Quick Access Toolbar. Now you can see that bold is right up here on the Quick Access Toolbar, and I can access it no matter what tab I happen to be on. There's bold. We'll learn a lot more about customizing the Quick Access Toolbar and the ribbon in our more advanced classes. For now, I'm going to remove it by right-clicking and selecting Remove from Quick Access Toolbar. You can see how easy that is. On the bottom of the Excel window, you'll find the status bar. The status bar is used to give you information about the current status of Microsoft Excel. For example, right now you can see the status bar says ready. That's because it's ready for me to input some data. If I'm typing information in, you can see it changes to enter because I'm currently in data entry mode. If you select a block of numbers, you'll see some interesting information about those numbers on the status bar. For example, down here, you can see the average, the count, and the sum of the numbers that I just selected. You can even customize the information that appears on the status bar, and we'll learn how to do that in one of our more advanced classes. Next to the status bar, you'll find different views buttons. These buttons let you switch between normal, page layout, and page break preview views. We'll talk about these in a lot more detail later. You're going to spend most of your time in the default, which is normal view, but you can use page layout to add headers and footers and see how your spreadsheet's going to look when it's printed. And page break preview will show you where the page breaks are, so you can see what information is going to fall on page 2 or page 3. In the bottom right corner of the Excel window, you'll find the different zoom controls. You can use the plus or minus buttons to zoom in or zoom out to get closer or further away from the spreadsheet data. You're not changing the way the data is going to look on the printed page. You're just zooming in or zooming out so that you can see more or less information on the screen. You can also grab this little slider button here, click and drag it to zoom in or out. 100% is the default. You can also click on this 100% number here, and a dialog box opens with some more options. You can go right to 200%, 75%, 25%, or type in a custom number. I'll just click cancel. We'll talk a lot more about the zoom controls in a future lesson. And yes, I realize I say that a lot, that we'll learn about more topics in future lessons, but remember, today is just the overview class. We're just going to give you a broad overview of what Excel can do, and we'll drill down and get more specific in future lessons. As I always say, you have to learn how to walk before you can run. I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information at once. Along the right side and the bottom of the spreadsheet area, you'll find two scroll bars. There's a horizontal scroll bar and a vertical scroll bar. You can use the scroll bars to move down or up or left and right inside your spreadsheet. You can either click on the arrowheads or click and drag this box in the center of the scroll bar. If you think of the scroll bar as a little elevator, you can click on the arrowheads to go up or down one floor at a time, or click on the elevator itself and drag it to go to any floor. In Lesson 4, we're going to finish our look at the Excel interface. We'll start with the formula bar, then learn about the parts of a spreadsheet, including rows, columns, and cells. We'll learn about the mouse pointer and the different sheet tabs. Now, so far in today's lesson, almost all of the features we've discussed are the same for most of the Microsoft Office applications. You'll find features like the ribbon, the title bar, the scroll bars in several different applications, including Word and PowerPoint. There are some features that are unique to Excel. For example, the formula bar. The formula bar is used for displaying the data or the formula that's in a specific cell. For example, right here in this cell, I can see the number 56. If I click down here on this cell, A5, the formula bar displays a formula. There's something in A5 aside from just a number. And that's what the formula bar is good for. It's for showing you what's actually in that cell. You can use the formula bar to edit your formulas by simply clicking right here. And you'll see some other buttons pop up, this little F of X button, the check mark, the X. We'll talk about these in future lessons. Now below the formula bar is where you're going to do most of your work. This is called the spreadsheet area, or just the spreadsheet. Now a spreadsheet consists of a couple of different things. A spreadsheet consists of columns that go vertically and rows that go horizontally. Each column has a letter on top of it. For example, this is column D. This is column F. I have numbers in column A, and so on. Each row has a number to the left of it. You can see that's row 2, row 3, row 5, and so on. And if you scroll down, you'll see there are lots and lots of rows, and you can scroll to the right and see there are lots and lots of columns. Where a row and a column intersect, that's called a cell. You indicate a cell by naming its column and its row. For example, right now, I have cell C2 selected. This is cell E3, H2, and so on. The value in cell A3 is 34. That is how you name a cell. You'll find the name of the current cell in the name box. You can see as I move from cell to cell, the value in the name box changes. Right now it says C2. Over here it says E3. That's the name box right here. And later on, I'll show you how you can actually name your own cells. The little plus sign floating around on the screen is called the mouse pointer. The mouse pointer usually looks like a white plus, but it can change depending on what you're doing. If you move over the ribbon, for example, it changes into an arrowhead. If you move between two column heads right here, you can see the mouse changes into a little black double pointing arrow. That's so you can resize a column. If you hover over the top of a column header, you can see it changes into a black downward pointing arrow. That's so you can select the entire column, or you can select an entire row. And we'll see how this works in more detail a little bit later on. If you click in the formula bar, you'll see you have a blinking cursor. That's so you can edit your formula or the data in a cell. And again, don't worry about all these specifics right now. We'll talk about all this stuff in future lessons. I just want you to be aware that the mouse pointer will change based on where you happen to be pointing in Excel. Underneath the spreadsheet, you'll find 3 sheet tabs. They're labeled Sheet 1, Sheet 2, and Sheet 3. In Excel, the file that you're working with can be comprised of one or more sheets or spreadsheets. You can switch between these sheets by simply clicking on the Sheet tab. There's Sheet 2 and Sheet 3. And this is handy because you can have some information on Sheet 1, let's say January's information, and then switch over to Sheet 2 and put February's information on Sheet 2. So there's Sheet 1 and Sheet 2. You can add more sheets if you want. You can delete sheets. You can rename them and change the sheet tabs. And we'll see how all this works in a future lesson. And of course, you can get creative with your sheets. For example, in this workbook, I've created 3 different sheets, one for 2010, 2009, and 2008. The sheets are all very similar, but I've changed some of the formatting and the colors to make the workbook look a little more professional. And yes, of course, you'll learn how to do all of this in upcoming lessons. In Lesson 5, we're going to learn how to enter data into our first spreadsheet. Now that we know all about the different parts of the Excel interface, let's begin creating our own spreadsheet. We'll begin by entering in some sample text. We're going to create a sales summary sheet for a fictional company. So let's start by typing in a list of our sales reps. Make sure that you're currently sitting in cell A1. That's the very first cell in our sheet. If for some reason you're sitting over here in a different cell, all you have to do is take your mouse, move it over A1 right in the middle of it, and click. That's how you move the selected cell to a different location. So now I'm in cell A1. You can also use the arrow keys on your keyboard to move around inside of a spreadsheet. So again, if I'm sitting in some other cell, let's say C3, and I want to move up to cell A1, I'll just use the up and left arrow keys. I'll go up, up, left, left. And that's again how you can move around inside your spreadsheet, either with the mouse or with the keyboard. So sitting in cell A1, I want to type in the header for that column. What is this column going to represent? Well, I'm going to put a list of sales reps in here. So I'll type in the words sales, space, and then rep. And notice as I type, sales rep appears in the cell itself, and it also appears up here in the formula bar. You can see it in two places. When I'm done, I'm going to press enter, the enter key on my keyboard. That moves me down to cell A2. If you're entering data into columns and you want to move down to the next row each time you finish an item, press the enter key. Enter, 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 enter. It's the same as pressing the down arrow. If you want to enter data into rows and go across, you can use the tab key. Tab, 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 tab. That's the same as using the right arrow key. I'll go back over here to cell A2 using my left arrow key. Now let's type in the names of our sales reps. So make sure you're sitting in cell A2, and then I'll type in Chris, enter, Alex, enter, Jan, enter, and Pat. Enter. There's my 4 sales reps. Now I want to move up to the top of the next column, to cell B1. I can either use the arrow keys, or I can just grab the mouse and click on cell B1. Now I'm ready to enter in the next column of data. Now we're tracking monthly sales for each sales rep. So in the header row, I'm going to type in a list of months. So I'll type in January, I'll abbreviate JAN, tab, February, tab, March, tab, and April. We'll just do 4 months for now. Now let's type in some sales figures. I'll use my arrow keys and move down over here to cell B2. And I'll type in some data. 89, enter, 50, enter, 30, enter, and 12, enter. Now I'm ready to move up to the top of the next column, so I'll use the arrow keys. Or, of course, you can use the mouse. Personally, I'm partial to the keyboard. I like to use the keyboard whenever possible. I hate having to stop and grab the mouse and click on something, unless I absolutely have to. If I can use a keyboard for it, I will. And yes, there are a lot of different keyboard shortcuts that you can use to access many of Excel's features. I'm going to teach you some of the more popular ones today, and we'll learn a lot more as we go into our more advanced classes. Let's type in February's data. 45, enter. 65, enter. 56, enter. And 77, enter. Move to the top of the next column using the arrow keys. Now go ahead and fill in March and April. The exact numbers that you use don't make a difference for this class. Just put in some random numbers. Now notice in Excel that all of the numeric values, the numbers, line up on the right side of the cell, but all of the text values, like these headers here with April, line up to the left side of the cell. We'll see how to correct that when we get to cell formatting. In Lesson 6, we'll learn how to edit the data that we entered into our spreadsheet in the last lesson. In the last lesson, we created a basic spreadsheet showing a list of sales reps and their sales for each month from January through April. Now let's say I goofed. Alex's sales for February should have been 62, but I accidentally typed in 65. I need to correct that. Now, as with everything in Excel, there are multiple ways to do this. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to edit data in a cell. I want you to pick one way and stick with it until you're comfortable. You don't have to remember all of these different methods. The first way to replace data in a cell is to simply type over it. So take your mouse and click on C3, or use your arrow keys and move there, and then just type right over it. I'll type in 62. Notice that what I type in replaces the data that was there. Press enter, and you can see the change has been made. You don't have to do anything special, like delete the data first. Just type right over it. The next way to edit data in a cell is to use the formula bar. I can click on the cell, C3, then click on the formula bar right here, and notice now I have a blinking cursor. I can then backspace over the 2 and replace it with, oh, let's say a 7. So now it says 67. Press enter, and you're done. Now 67 is the value in cell C3. So you can use the formula bar to make changes to any data in a cell. This is especially handy if you have a lot of data in a cell and you don't want to have to replace the whole thing. Let's say sales rep, for example. Let's say I want this to say just rep instead of sales rep. I can come up here, click in the formula bar. Notice I clicked right after the word sales, and now I can backspace the word sales away, and then maybe press delete to get rid of that space. And now it just says rep, and I can press enter. All right, but I'm going to put that back so it says sales rep, and just type right over the cell. The formula bar is very handy if you have very long functions and you want to change just one little bit of a function or formula instead of retyping the whole thing. You can also edit a cell by simply double-clicking on it. For example, let's say I want to change the 67 back to a 62. I will double-click on cell C3. Notice the blinking cursor. Now I'm in edit mode, and I can press delete to delete those characters and press 62. For those of you who have not taken my Microsoft Word course and don't know the difference between the backspace and the delete keys, here's how they work. The backspace key eats the characters on the left side of the blinking cursor. So if I press backspace right now, back, 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 you can see it eats the characters on the left or behind the cursor. The delete key on your keyboard eats the characters on the right side of the cursor. So if I press delete, 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 you can see it eats the characters on the right side of the blinking cursor. That's the difference between backspace and delete. It works the same in Excel. As long as you're editing a cell and you have the blinking cursor, it works the same as it does in Microsoft Word. As I mentioned earlier, there are a ton of different keyboard shortcuts that you can use when working with Excel. One of my favorites is the F2 key, function 2. It's on your keyboard, right across the top row usually. If you press the F2 key, it will put you into edit mode in whatever cell you happen to be in. So I'm going to move my mouse out of the way, and if I'm using the arrow keys to move around, and I decide I want to change that cell, all I have to do is press the F2 key on my keyboard. And now I'm in edit mode. So now I can change that to a 97 and press enter. That's the F2 key. So to recap, you can edit the data in a cell by simply over-typing it, which means clicking on it or moving to it and just typing some stuff over it. Or you can use the formula bar, click on the cell, then edit the data in the formula bar. Or you can double-click on a cell and change it right in place. Or you can press the F2 key to go into edit mode in the cell also. As I said before, there's many ways to do things in Excel. Pick one way that you're comfortable with and stick with that. You can erase the data from a cell by using the delete key on the keyboard when you're not in edit mode. For example, let's say I want to delete the word Pat from cell A5. I'll use my keyboard and move over to cell A5 and then press the delete key. Notice all of the data has been removed from cell A5. I just erased it. That's the delete key when you're not in edit mode. Now let's say I goofed. I really want Pat there. Well, I've got a couple of options. I could just retype Pat, but there's a way to undo a mistake. It's called the undo feature. If at any time you realize that you goofed, come right up top here on the Quick Launch toolbar and find the Undo button. Right now it says Undo Clear because the last thing that I did was I cleared the data out of cell A5. I'm going to now click on the Undo button, and it puts Pat right back there. That was the last thing that I did. If you keep clicking on the Undo button, it will continue to undo the previous steps that you did in order to try and fix your mistake. Undo also has a close cousin, which is the Redo button right here. Redo is essentially the undo for the undo. It puts the mistake back. So if you decide you really wanted to get rid of Pat, click on Redo, and it will clear the cell again. But I do want Pat there, so again, I'll undo it. Undo essentially steps backwards, and then redo steps forwards again. And we'll talk a lot more about undo and redo and some different options in future lessons. For now, I just want you to know that undo is there. So if you make a mistake, you can click on the undo button to get rid of that mistake. In Lesson 7, we're going to start looking at how to format our spreadsheets to make them look more professional. We'll learn about cell alignment, cell ranges, bold, italics, and underline. Now that we know how to enter data into a spreadsheet and edit that data, let's learn how to format the spreadsheet to make it look a little more professional. The first change I would like to make involves the column headers. Notice how January, February, March, and April line up on the left side of each cell, but the numbers underneath them line up on the right. It makes for a very messy column. This is the way that Excel was designed. Text values will always line up on the left side of a cell, whereas numeric values and dates and things like currency amounts will line up on the right side of the cell. You can change the alignment of a cell using the alignment functions up here in the alignment group on the Home tab. Right here you can see align left, center, and align right. So the first thing you have to do is click on the cell you want to change. In this case, I'll click on cell B1. Then come up here in the alignment group and click on align text right. That will change that cell so all the data in it lines up to the right side. This makes it so the column header lines up nicely over the data in that column. You can also click on center or align left if you'd like, but I'm going to bring it back to align right. Now don't confuse the horizontal alignment with the vertical alignment. These three buttons up here will align the value to the top, middle, or bottom of the cell if you have a tall row. And we'll see how this works in a future lesson. Now I could sit here and do each one of these cells one at a time by clicking on them and then clicking on Align Right. And this isn't too bad, only having 4 cells to do. But what if I had 40 cells? That would take a long time. There has to be a more efficient way to apply a single formatting command to multiple cells. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to come up here and click on the undo button a couple times. Undo, 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 undo. And I put them all back the way they were when we started this lesson. Now it would be nice if there was a way I could change the alignment for all 4 of those cells with one command. In order to do that, we have to select multiple cells. You can select multiple cells by moving your mouse over the middle of the first cell, right in the middle, click, and then drag to select additional cells. I've now selected a range of cells from B1 to E1. Now if I make any change, for example, align text right, it affects all of the selected cells in that range. Cell ranges can be horizontal, like that one. They can also be vertical, such as that range from A2 to A5. Or they can be both horizontal and vertical. For example, this is a range right here from C2 to E5. This range shown here from B2 to E2 is represented by B2 colon E2. And we'll see a lot more of this when we start dealing with formulas and functions. That's how you refer to a particular range. It's the starting cell colon the ending cell. This range is C3 colon D5. It starts at C3 and it goes down to D5. Now don't worry too much about this right now. You're not going to be quizzed on it. But I just want to expose you to it so later on, when we get to formulas and functions, you've seen it and you're a little more familiar with it. A cell range is simply defined by its upper left cell, followed by a colon, followed by its bottom right cell. Now the next thing that I'd like to do is to bold my column headers. So I'll take my mouse and I'll click and drag to select A1 through E1. Let the mouse button go. Then I'll come up here and click on the B for bold button in the font group on the Home tab. And that will bold all the selected cells, A1 through E1. And if I click off of them over here somewhere, it makes it easier to notice. If for any reason you decide you don't want those cells to be bolded, simply select them again and click on bold. That turns off the bold feature. Remember I mentioned that a little while ago. Some switches are simple toggle buttons, right? Click to turn it on, click to turn it off. I'll leave them bolded though. The same techniques work for italics and underline. Let's say you want to italicize the sales rep names. I'll select A2 through A5 and click on the italics button. I've just italicized the sales rep names. And yes, of course, you can combine bold with italics. If you want to italicize sales rep as well, you can do that. I'll turn it back off though. In Lesson 8, we're going to continue learning about formatting our sheets. We'll learn how to change the font size. We'll learn how to resize rows and columns. And we'll learn how to change the foreground and background colors. In the last lesson, we learned how to select a range of cells and make them bold, italics, or underline. In this lesson, we're going to learn some more of the font options. Let's select cells A1 through E1 again and change the font face, or the way the font looks. Right up here in the font group, you'll see the font face drop-down box. And if you click that box open, you'll see a whole bunch of different types of fonts in here. Everything from Albertus to Algerian, and you can scroll down. Now, the fonts that you have on your system may be slightly different than the fonts that I have on my system, so look down the list and find something that you like. I'll pick Broadway. And as soon as you click on it, you see the change takes effect. In fact, if you look, while I'm scrolling down here, as I hover over the different fonts, you can see in the background a preview of what the sheet will look like if I pick that font. Let's switch to Arial Rounded right here. And there's the new font. If you want to change the size of the text, select the cells again, and right next to the font face is the font size. Drop that box down, and again, you can hover over each number here and see a preview of what it will look like with that particular font size. I'll go with 14 point. And there we go. If you don't see a value that you like, let's say 16 is too small, but 18 is too big, you can type in a number like 17 right up here in the top box. Just back up here and type in 17 and then press enter. And there's 17 point. There are also two little buttons right here, increase font size and decrease font size. And you can click on these to step down or step up in increments to change your font size. Now take a look at something interesting that just happened when I increased my font size. Notice here in cell A1, the value sales rep is still in the cell. And I know that because I can see it in the formula bar. However, in the cell itself, I'm only seeing the word sales. That's because the data that's in that cell is too wide to fit in the column. So in order to fix that, I can either reduce the font size so you can see the whole thing, or I can just make the column wider. To resize a column, take your mouse and move it right between the column headers A and B. You'll see your mouse pointer changes to a black double pointing arrow with a line in the center of it. Click there and drag to resize that column. Now you can see I've made column A wide enough to display all of the data in cell A1. I can now see the whole label, sales rep. You can resize any column that you want. Let's say I want to make column D larger. I'll move my mouse right here, click and drag, and I've just made column D wider. If you want to bring it back, just click and drag back to the left, and there we go. Now here's a neat little trick. If you don't want to have to guess at how wide your column should be, move your mouse right here in that same spot and double click. Watch this. Click, click. Excel automatically resized that column to fit the data in it. This is handy, for example, if you have a small column, let's say like that, and you just want to be able to double click to widen out that column exactly as wide as it needs to be to fit the data in it. You can do that with any column that you want. Column B, C, D, and E. There we go. And I've just automatically resized all of those columns to be as wide as Excel thinks they need to be. You can resize rows almost the same way that you resize columns. Just take your mouse and move in the border between row 1 and 2, for example. Click and drag to make the row taller. And I'll just put that back. There we go. You can also double click there to automatically resize the row. Now let's change the background color, the fill color, behind the cell. I'm going to select A1 through E1 again. This little paint can right here changes the fill color. Now notice the little color underneath the paint can is yellow. So if I click on the paint can, I get a yellow background. And if you click off of those cells, you can see there's the yellow. But I don't want yellow. I want some different color. So again, let's select those cells. And notice the little teeny tiny down arrow just to the right of the fill color. drop that down by clicking on it, and here you can see a whole bunch of different colors. Go ahead and pick one that you like. I'll pick a light red. And there it is. And once again, click off of that range of cells to see the color exactly as it's going to appear. Notice the little bar underneath the paint can is now light red. That represents the color that's in the paint can. So if I click somewhere else now and just click on the paint can, I get that light red. I'll undo that. If you want a different color, again, select the cells, open up the paint can. You can pick from theme colors. Remember, themes are packages of colors and fonts that make your spreadsheets look more professional. We'll talk more about themes in a future lesson. There are also standard colors down here like reds, yellow, greens, blues, and so on. There's no fill, which is the default. And there's also more colors that opens up an even larger palette of colors you can pick from. Let's pick a dark purple right here. And there we go. I now have a dark purple background. Now it's kind of hard to read black text on a purple background. So let's change the text color or the foreground color. I'm going to select A1 through E1 again. Now right here is the foreground color or the font color. It works the same way as the paint can. Right now it's red, so that means if I click on that, I'm going to get red text. That's kind of ugly, red on purple. So let's drop this down and pick a different foreground color. We could go with white or a light orange. Let's go with a light blue, right about there. That looks neat. So now I have a real light blue on a purple background. Let's say we want to make our sales rep names a slightly different color. Now I'm not going to pick that same light blue because now I can barely read them. So let's open this up and go with how about a dark blue like that. And this low value right here, Pat only had $12 in sales in January. Pretty bad value, right? Well, I'm going to click on this and change it to red so it highlights it. Maybe even bold it too. Now Pat's January sales really stand out. So that's how we can change our background color and our foreground color. In Lesson 9, we'll learn how to perform calculations in Excel. We'll learn how formulas work, and we'll learn about the basic math operators. As we've seen in our previous lessons, Microsoft Excel is great for storing data. But what if you want to perform some calculations on that data? Being able to store all of this sales data is handy, but I want more. I want to be able to calculate a total for each month and for each sales rep. But before we learn how to do that, let's see how basic math operations work in Excel. Let's come down here and click on Sheet 2 to move to a blank worksheet in the same book. This will give us a blank sheet to do some experimenting on. Let's type in a couple numbers. In cell A1, I'll put the number 10, enter. And in cell A2, I'll put the number 5, enter. Now my goal is to add these two numbers together. Now in Excel, math formulas work backwards from traditional math. For example, in a normal math problem, you might see x plus y equals z. Well, in Excel, I want you to think backwards. Think z equals x plus y. Now instead of x and y, we're going to substitute in the cells that we want to add. So in this case, z equals A1 plus A2, if you want to add those two cells together. And now all you do in Excel is just get rid of the z. Equals A1 plus A2 is what you put into a cell. The z is the current cell that you're in. You're going to set z's value, or the current cell's value, equal to A1 plus A2. And it's very important in Excel to make sure that you start each formula off with an equal sign. You have to use the equal sign to indicate that you're starting a formula. Now let's go back to our spreadsheet, and just so you can see a little better, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit using the zoom tool here. Zoom in just a little bit, there we go. Now in cell A3, I want to put the result of adding A1 plus A2. So to begin a formula, I start with the equal sign. Then you type in the two cells you want to add, so A1 plus A2, and then press enter. And there's my result, 15. 15 is equal to 10 plus 5. And again, I just want to take a second to stress, don't forget the equal sign. Whenever I teach the Excel Basics class in the classroom, 90% of the time when a student doesn't get their formula right, it's because they forgot the equal sign. If you don't type the equal sign in, it's not going to work right. Now, one of the nice things about Excel is that Excel will automatically recalculate all of your formulas if the data changes. For example, if later on A1 changes to 12, notice how my calculation down here updated itself, because A3 is equal to A1 plus A2, and you can see that up here in the formula bar. Whatever A1 plus A2 happens to be at any given moment will show up in A3. When it comes to working with formulas, the cell will always show the result of the formula, but the formula bar will show you what's actually in the cell, the formula itself. Now, if you want to change the formula, you can use any of the techniques that I showed you earlier. You can double-click on the cell, or you can click up here in the formula bar, or you can press F2. I'm going to click here in the formula bar. Now notice A1 and A2 are different colors, and you can see little colored boxes around the cells down here. That's just Excel's way of letting you see visually what cells or ranges of cells you're working with. A1 plus A2 show up in color. We'll see how to work more with these colored boxes in a future lesson. But let's say I want to change this formula. Let's say instead of addition, I want subtraction. So I'll click right here after the plus. I'll press the backspace key and then put a minus sign in there. Now I have equals A1 minus A2, and then I'll press enter. And now you can see the formula has changed from addition to subtraction. Here are all of Excel's basic math operators. We have addition, the plus sign. Subtraction is the minus sign. Division is the forward slash. Multiplication is the asterisk, the little star. On most keyboards, it's Shift 8. And then exponentiation is raising a number to a power, like 3 to the 4th power would be 3, and then that symbol called a caret, followed by a 4. So again, if you want to change the formula, you can click here, click on the formula bar, or just double-click on the cell. And now I'll change this to A1 times A2. That's multiplication. And there we go, there's a 60, 12 times 5. Now when working with formulas, you're not limited to just typing in cells. You can also type in constants or numbers. For example, I could say equals A3 divided by 10. That'll take the value in A3 and divide it by 10, which should give me a 6. There we go. That takes the value in cell A3 and divides it by 10. You don't always have to use a cell value in your formulas. You can use actual numbers. Want to raise a number to a power? That's easy. Let's say you want 6 squared, so equals A4 raised to the 2nd power. Now notice I typed in a lowercase a there. That's fine. Excel does not care if you type in capital or lowercase letters for your cell references. A4 to the 2nd power, 36. 6 times 6. Okay, so we're done with this temporary data. I want to delete the whole column. Now, I could just select all of this data and press delete, or I can wipe out all of the information in the column at once by simply clicking up here on the column header, the actual letter A, and that will select the entire column. Now I can press delete on the keyboard. That's how you clear the contents or erase an entire column. Technically, it's called clearing a range of cells. In Lesson 10, we're continuing on with basic math in Excel. We'll learn how to add multiple cells together, take an average of a group of cells, and we'll learn about the order of operations in mathematics. In the last lesson, we learned how to perform some basic math operations on our data. We only added numbers 2 at a time, however. Let's say you want to add more than just 2 numbers. Let's say we have a column of test grades, 90, 85, 70, 65, and 90 again. Now, if you want to quickly see the sum or average of those numbers, just select those cells. Select A1 through A5. And notice down here on the status bar, you can see the average, count, and sum of any numbers that you've selected. That's a neat little feature, but it doesn't store the value anywhere in our sheet. Now, how do you get that sum in your spreadsheet? Well, it's as simple as this. In cell A6, I'll type in equals. Remember, you have to start every formula with the equal sign. Equals A1 plus A2 plus A3 plus A4 plus A5, and then press enter. If you click on A6, you'll see the formula up here in the formula bar, and you'll also see the result here in cell A6. Now here's a little shortcut if you don't like all that typing. I'll delete A6 with the delete key, and watch this. You can type in equals, and then just click on the cells. Click on A1, and then type in the plus. Click on A2, plus, click, plus, click, plus, click. That's a little faster than typing all that out. You can just click on the cell that you want to include into the formula. I'll press enter, and I get the same result. Now let's say, instead of adding all those numbers up, I want to calculate their average. Well, how do you calculate an average? You add up all the values, and then you divide by the total number of values. So in this case, I'll add up A1 through A5, that's 5 values, then I'll divide by 5. So I should be able to click on A6 and edit my formula. I've got the numbers added up here, and then come to the end and go divided by 5. All right, divided by 5, and press enter. And hold on. 328 is definitely not the average of those 5 numbers. It should be somewhere in the middle of them. Take a look at the formula again, see if you can figure it out. I've added up A1, A2, A3, A4, and A5, and then divided by 5. What's the problem? Well, we forgot about the basic math order of operations. If you go back to high school, remember they taught you that exponentiation goes first, that's raising a number to a power. Then comes multiplication and division. Then finally comes addition and subtraction. And if you want to violate these rules, you have to use parentheses. So for an example, if you have a formula like this, 9 plus 5 times 2, the result equals 19, because 5 times 2 is evaluated first, that comes out to 10, and then 9 is added to that result. If you want the 9 plus 5 to be evaluated first, you have to enclose them inside of parentheses. Now the 9 plus 5 is evaluated first, that's 14, then multiplied by 2, and the result is 28. As you can see, there's a big difference when you include those parentheses. So in order to fix our math problem here in Excel, all I have to do is put parentheses around the addition problems first, then divide by 5. So I'll put an open parenthesis there, and a closed parenthesis right there after the A5. Now when I press enter, I get the correct value. And 80 looks like it's about the average of those 5 numbers. If you want to double check it, just select them, and Excel will tell you on the bottom down here in the status bar that yes, that is indeed the average. What happened the first time with the original formula was that Excel followed the order of operations. It divided A5 by 5 first, and then it added the other values in. So Excel was just doing its job and following proper math rules. Now with the corrected formula, all 5 cells are added together first because they're inside parentheses, then that result is divided by 5. In Lesson 11, we'll learn how to save our workbook to our computer hard disk, load it back up again, and print our spreadsheet to the printer. Here I am back in Sheet 1 of the workbook that we started earlier today. I'd like to save this workbook to my computer's hard disk so that I have it for later. Again, as with everything else in Excel, there are several different ways to do this. I'm going to click on the floppy disk icon right there on my quick access toolbar. It says save if you hold your mouse over it. This opens up the Save As dialog box. I'm using Windows Vista, but it should look pretty similar regardless of what version of Windows you have. I'm placed inside my Documents folder where I can save any documents that I create. Down toward the bottom of this window, you'll see a spot to type in a file name. Mine says book1.xlsx. The extension there, xlsx, simply means that this is an Excel workbook file. You may or may not see that file extension depending upon your settings in Windows. If you don't see it, don't worry about it. We'll learn about the different Excel file extensions in a future class. Make sure the Save As type says Excel Workbook, which it should. That's the default setting. Now I want to type in a meaningful file name that tells me a little bit about what's in this workbook. So I'm going to click here in the file name field and type in Sales Data 2010. So I know what's in this workbook file. Then I'll come down here at the bottom and click on the Save button. Now this file has been saved to my computer's hard drive. And if you look up top in the title bar, you'll see it says Sales Data 2010. That's the name of this workbook file. And remember, this workbook includes all of the sheets down on the bottom here. Sheet 1, Sheet 2, Sheet 3. These are all included inside of this file. Now let's pretend it's the end of the year, and I want to get my spreadsheet ready to accept data for 2011. I've got the same 4 sales reps, but I don't need any of these numbers, so I'll select those and press delete. Now I want to save this sheet so I can use it for 2011, but I don't want to click on the Save button right here because if I do, it will save it using the name that I gave it before. This Save button here is just a quick save. If you've already specified a file name, it will save it over the old file. So what you have to do instead is click on the File tab and then click on Save As. Save As will allow you to specify a different file name. So I can come down here and change the 2010 to 2011 and then click the Save button. Now the file name is changed to Sales Data 2011 and I'm ready to start typing in new values. I usually recommend students do that first. Do the Save As operation first before you start changing the sheet. This way you save a copy of it, and then you're working with the copy. I don't know how many times I've made changes to a spreadsheet and then hit the Save button out of habit, and then I said, oops, I just deleted all my old data. So be very careful when you're doing that. Now I want to close the workbook file. I don't want to completely close Excel down, so I'm not going to use the big red X up top here. I'm going to use this bottom X. This closes down the Excel workbook, but leaves Excel open. And now you can see this is blank down here where the spreadsheet goes. I have Excel still running, but there's no workbook open. Now to open a workbook, click on the File tab, and over on the right here you'll see Recent Workbooks. You can see any workbooks that you've worked with recently. Here you can see I have a calendar spreadsheet that I was using earlier, and my other two sales data workbooks show up on this list. If you want to open one of them, just click on it. There's my sales data 2010. I'll go ahead and close that sheet again. Now, if you click on File, and you don't see the workbook that you want to open in the Recent Workbooks list, click on the Open button right here. This will bring up the Open dialog box, and you can browse through all the folders on your computer to find the workbook file that you want to open. In this case, I'll just double-click on Sales Data 2011, and that will open it right up. The Recent listing shows you any workbooks that you've worked with recently. It'll keep a list of the most commonly used workbooks. Now, as you can see, I have my calendar spreadsheet pinned to the Recent Workbooks list. If you have spreadsheets that you work with on a regular basis and you want to make sure they always stay on the Recent Workbooks list, you can click on the little pin icon right there, and that will stick it to the Recent Workbooks list. It will always show up on here. If you decide later on that you don't need that workbook showing up on the Recent Workbooks list, just unpin it by clicking on the pin again. Normally when you open Excel, it brings you into a blank new workbook. If you're already working with a different workbook and you want to create another blank new workbook, just click on File and then New. The Available Templates window opens, and you can see there's lots of different templates in here that you can pick from to create new workbook files. There's calendars and budgets and fax covers, all kinds of different templates in here. We'll talk about these in a future class. But for now, I just want a blank workbook, so I'll double-click on the blank workbook template. And there we go. This is the same blank workbook that you'd have if you opened up a fresh copy of Excel. I'll just close this workbook down by clicking on the X here, and that'll bring me back to my Sales Data 2011 workbook. And yes, you can have multiple workbooks open at the same time and work between them. We'll cover that in a future lesson. When you're ready to print your spreadsheet, click on the File tab and come down to the Print option. Over on the right-hand side here, you'll see a little print preview of what your sheet is going to look like. It's Excel's best estimation of what the printed page will look like. Right here you can select the number of copies. You can use these little arrows to go up and down. One copy. You can change the printer here if you have multiple printers on your computer or if you want to print to a network printer. And there are additional settings here if you scroll down. What to print, whether you want collation, the page orientation, and so on. We'll cover all these options in a future lesson. When you're actually ready to print, click on the big Print button on top here. The spreadsheet will then be sent down to the selected printer. If you don't want to print at this point, just click on the File tab again, and that menu will close. So now you know how to save your document, save it with a different file name, load your document back up again, and print it to your printer. Let's take a moment now to review what we learned in today's class. We learned about the Excel 2010 interface, including the ribbon, the parts of the window, the title bar, the maximize and minimize buttons, the quick access toolbar, the zoom controls, and the views buttons. We learned how to enter data into a cell, how to move around with the mouse and arrow keys, how to edit data both in the formula bar and directly in the cells. We learned about undo and redo. We learned how to format cells, how to change the font size, the alignment of the text inside a cell, bold, italics, underline, and of course the foreground and background colors. We learn how to resize rows and columns. Then we learn how to perform basic math operations in Excel. We learned about the different math operators: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. We learned about the order of operations, how to add a bunch of cells together, and how to take an average. And finally, we learned how to save our workbook to disk, load it back up again, and print our spreadsheets. What's next? The next course in the series is Excel 2010 Beginner Level 2. This course will cover using the clipboard for cut, copy, and paste, using autofill to automatically copy a formula down an entire column. We'll learn about the different cell data formats, including currency, accounting, dates, fractions, and more. We'll learn how to work more with rows and columns, including inserting and deleting rows and columns. We'll also learn to work with different sheets, inserting new sheets, deleting sheets, moving sheets around. We'll learn the right way to sort data in our spreadsheets. We'll learn about conditional formatting, which is changing the look of a cell based on its data. And we'll learn how to use the Find and Replace feature. For more information on this course, an outline of exactly what's covered, and some sample videos, visit my website at excellearningzone.com and look for Excel 2010 Beginner Level 2. Again, if you need help with the topics covered in today's lessons, please feel free to post your questions in the Excel Interactive Student Forums. If you need help with a Microsoft Excel project that you're working on and your questions weren't answered in today's class, you can visit my Tech Help page at excellearningzone.com/techhelp. You can ask me your questions directly, and I'll either answer them in a future video lesson, or I can get back to you directly with an email. Plus, your questions aren't limited to just Microsoft Excel. You can ask me about anything computer-related, including Windows, Word, Microsoft Access, web design, Photoshop, and lots more. If you have any other customer service-related inquiries, such as questions about our courses in general, help with your account, or other non-technical issues, please feel free to contact us at excellearningzone.com/contact. While you're on my website, be sure to stop by the Microsoft Excel Tips and Tricks section, where you will find lots of free tutorials and videos. That's at excellearningzone.com/tips. Now, the only way I can make these classes better is with your feedback. Visit excellearningzone.com/survey today and let me know what you thought of this course. Did I go too fast or too slow? Did I cover enough material? Give me your feedback today. Also, let me know what topics you'd like to see covered in future lessons. Thank you for learning with excellearningzone.com. I hope you've enjoyed this class, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. This course is copyright 2010 by excellearningzone.com. All rights reserved. No portion of this course may be reproduced, copied, edited, or otherwise distributed without the express written permission of excellearningzone.com. This course may not be used by an educational, government, or commercial organization without a specific site license.